Hello there! Today you're working on a two-step equations worksheet. And this worksheet is a level 3 worksheet, which means you should have a good understanding of how to solve equations. If you still have problems or you still struggle a bit, maybe you should try doing the level 1 or the level 2. But I'm here to help you with the level 3 worksheet, so let's get started. It says right here, you are trying to separate the numbers and variables. But before you start moving things around, carefully look at the equation and think about which moves would separate the numbers and variables in the shortest amount of time. In other words, you have an equal sign and you're trying to keep a variable, let's say like d, and a number, let's say 3, on opposite sides of the equal sign. So when you're finished solving the equation, it should look something like this. And what I do is I think of the equal sign as a wall. And that way I have the d on one side of the wall, or the variable, and the number, or the 3, on the other. And that is the goal of solving equations. Let's continue here. It says the equation to the right could be solved a few different ways. But which way would be the easiest and fastest? We're trying to speed up our time, make our life a little easier by looking at the equation and making the fastest and easiest moves to solve the equation. Let's take a look at what they did. They had 6n, which means they have a number and a variable on this side, so no one is happy. And over here we have a 2n plus 16, and again no one is happy here. I use this happy and not happy saying because if a number is next to a variable, he wants to get away from it, or she wants to get away from it, and that tells us we need to move it to the opposite side. So I always use this statement, who's happy and who's not happy. And as you can see, no one's happy because we have numbers and variables on both sides of the equal sign. So for step 1, they decided to move the 16 to the other side, the opposite side. And when you move the number to the opposite side, you have to do the opposite operation. And you have to do that to both sides. So as you can see, they minus 16 to both sides. And 16 minus 16 equals 0, so they cancel each other out. And over here now you have a negative 16 or a minus 16. Then we're right here. And on step 2, they decided to move the 6n to the other side. And again, you're moving it to the opposite side. And since this is a plus 6n, they're going to do minus 6n to both sides. And 6n minus 6n cancels each other out, produces 0. And over here, they do 6 minus 2, which equals 4. And you take the sign of the bigger number, so they get negative 4n. Then they needed to move the 4 away from the n to join the 16. And that'll leave the n by itself, and you'll have the numbers on the other side. And right here they have 4n, which means negative 4 times n. So the opposite operation would be division. So they're going to divide both sides by negative 4. And you see how they attach to negative 4 here? That saves us time. And so negative 4 divided by negative 4 will be 1. And there you get 1n. And negative 16 divided by negative 4 will give us 4 because 2 negatives gives us a positive. We end up with 1n equals 4, and you should know anything times 1 will be itself, so it equals n equals 4. And we're finished. We have the variable on one side and the number on the other. So everybody is happy. But it says right here, we actually did the problem with too many steps. And they've got a point. The name of this worksheet is two-step equations, but they did 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. So they must have done something wrong. Do you see how we could have done this problem quicker? What is wrong with doing step number 1 first? What is wrong with that? Below is the same problem. How would you solve it? So let's take a look at this problem. We have a 6n here, and we have a 2n here, and we have a 16. Well, for their step number 1, they decided to move the 16 over here. But why would you do that? All you're doing is sending the 16 over to another variable. I mean, the 2n might say, yeah, I got rid of the 16. But the 6n saying, what are you doing? Leave the 16 over there. Their mistake was they should have moved the 2n, not the 16. And that way the 2n would have joined the 6n. And guess what? The 16 would be by himself and he would be happy. So let's give this a try. If we move the 2n, there's no sign here, so this is a positive. We would do the opposite operation, which would be minus 2n minus 2n. Well, 2n minus 2n is gone. It's 0. So you're left with 16 on this side. And as I just told you, he's happy now. There's no variables on his side. And over here we do 6n minus 2n, which is 4n. And then the 4 wants to get away from the n, so he wants to join the 16. And we already talked about this. 4n equals 4 times n. And the opposite operation would be division. So we would divide by 4 on both sides. And 4 divided by 4 is 1, so they canceled themselves out. So n would equal 4. So that only took us 2 steps. So do you see, by looking at the problem before starting and finding the easiest and fastest way to solve the equation saves us time. So over here they were wasting time because they didn't think about it or they didn't look at the equation before trying to solve it. By the way, did you notice also they had to deal with negative numbers here? We didn't have to do any of that here. Let me clean this up really quick. So let's take a look at the problems. It says right here, now your turn. Describe what steps you would take to solve the equation. So it's not asking us to solve it, it's just asking what steps would we take. And right here it gives you an example. It says first I would add 9 to both sides. So let's take a look at this problem really quick. You have t over 6, and if you've forgotten, yes, t over 6 is a fraction, but this also means t divided by 6, or you can write it like this, t divided by 6 as a long division problem. These all mean the same. So this t over 6 is actually division, and then you have minus 9 equals 15. So you need to ask yourself, who should you move first? So when you look at this problem, you should be thinking to yourself or saying to yourself, who can I move to make at least somebody happy? Well, the 15 is already happy. So you know you're not going to move the t over here because now the 15 would be upset. So you're either going to move the 6 or the 9. So who would you move first? Well, the easiest thing to do is move the addition and subtraction first. So that's why it says add the 9 to both sides. You would do plus 9 to both sides. Now the 9's gone because it's on the other side. And you're left right here with a t over 6. Let me erase that really quick. So now the question is, are you going to move the t or the 6? Well, of course you're going to move the 6 because he wants to join the other numbers. And since this is division, you're going to do the opposite operation. So then you would say, then I would multiply both sides by 6. And that's what you should do next. So first you would add the 9 to send it to the other side, and then you would multiply both sides by 6. Some of you might be saying to yourself right now, why don't I multiply by 6 first? If you do that first, you're going to have to multiply everything on this side by 6. That means you're going to have to multiply this 9 by 6, which makes the number a lot bigger, and it gives you more work to do. So usually you should move the addition or the subtraction first before you start multiplying and dividing. Let's take a look at number 2 really quick. Number 2, you have 45 minus 7x. So you have numbers and a variable on this side, so no one's happy. And you have 10 over here. 10 is by himself. He has no variables. He is happy. So we want to send the numbers over to the 10. We don't want to send the x. Why would we upset the 10? So it says first I would. Well, we just talked about this. What should we move first? Well, we can't move the 7 first because then we're going to have to start dividing. So we want to move the 45. and the 45 does not have a sign, so that means it's positive. So to move it, we're going to have to do a minus 45 to both sides. So it says first I'd write subtract 45 to both sides. Does that make sense? So I do that first. The 45's gone, and now you have the 7 and the x. Well, first off, it's not just a 7, it's a negative 7, because there's a minus sign right there. And we already talked about it. You're going to move the 7. And what is the opposite operation? Well, 7x equals 7 times x. So the opposite operation would be division. So then I would divide both sides by negative 7. Don't forget that negative right there. And those would be the first two steps, or those would be the two steps you would need to do to solve the equation. This is what I'd like you to do. I would like you to try 3 and 4 on your own. When you're finished, come back to me and we will check your answers. See you in a bit. Welcome back. You were supposed to do problem 3 and 4. Problem 3, you have 56 over here by himself. He is happy because there's no variables. Then you have 37 plus h over 5. No one is happy over here because there are numbers and variables together. On this problem, we are trying to figure out what we would move first. Well, we're going to move the 37 or the 5. And we already talked about this. We should move the 37 first because he's not attached to the variable, and also it's addition or subtraction. Since there's no sign, this is a positive, so it is going to be subtraction. You're going to subtract both sides by 37. So first I would subtract both sides by 37. So the 37's gone, and now you need to move the 5 to the other side. You're not going to move the h, because if you move the h, all you're doing is moving them over to the other numbers, and then they wouldn't be happy. So you're going to move the 5. We already talked about this. This is h divided by 5. So the opposite operation would be times 5. So then I would multiply both sides by 5. After we do these two steps, we would have solved the equation. Let's take a look at problem number 4. Problem number 4, we have 9w. Well, they're not happy because you have a number next to a variable, and you have 56 minus 5w. Well, no one's happy here either because you have numbers and a variable on the same side of the equal sign. So the question is, who would we move first? Well, if you move the 56 right here over here, all you're doing is bringing the 56 next to the variable. Well, he's already next to a variable, so why would you move him or her? If you move the 9w this way, all you're doing is combining the 9w with a number and variable already together. And again, you're making nobody happy. But check it out. If I move this 5w right here, take the whole thing and move it over here, that means the 56 will be by himself and he'll be happy. So to move the 5w, or the minus 5w, you'd have to do the opposite operation. So that means you would add plus 5w to both sides. So first I would add 5w to both sides. Okay, so the 5w's gone. And over here, you would have 9 plus 5w. This would give us 14w. So basically, you're going to have 14w equals 56. Well, you're not going to move the w, you're not going to move the 56. You're going to have to move the 14. And again, 14 next to w means 14 times w. And if you move it to the opposite side, you have to do the opposite operation, which means you would have to divide both sides by 14. And then you would have w by himself on one side and the numbers on the other. So it says right here, then I would divide both sides by 14. Let me erase that really quick so you can see it clearly. And there's your answers for problems 3 and 4. We didn't have to solve them, we just had to write what steps we needed to take to solve the equation. All right, let's move down here. Now on these, you're going to have to solve the equation. And the directions say solve the equations. So we need to look at this and figure out what we're going to move first, what we're going to move second to solve it. Remember, these are two-step equations. It shouldn't take you more than 2 steps. So right here we have 9g plus 98 equals 2g. Well, no one's happy because you have variables and numbers on both sides of the equal sign. So the question is, who can you move to make someone happy or to separate the variables and the numbers? And if you look closely, you can see if you move this 9g over here, it'll leave the 98 by himself. So he's happy, he's away from the variables. So let's move this 9g. To move it, we're going to have to do the opposite operation. And as you see, there's no sign here. So this is a positive. Remember, if there's no sign, it's a positive or it's a plus. So to do the opposite operation, I'm going to do minus 9g to both sides. The 9g's get canceled out because 9g minus 9g is 0. So we're left with 98 equals, and right here you're going to do 9 minus 2, which equals 7. And it's going to be negative because the 9 is the biggest number and it's a negative. So you're going to have negative 7g. Then you need to ask yourself, what are you going to move next? Well, you're not going to move the 98 because he's all by himself already. You're not going to move the g because the g would just be next to the 98. So of course you're going to move the negative 7. And again, this means multiplication. Negative 7 next to g equals negative 7 times g. And if you move it to the opposite side, you have to do the opposite operation, which would be division. So you're going to divide both sides by negative 7. So the negative 7's are canceled out. So you're left with g on this side. And what times 7 equals 98? Well, 7 times 10 is 70. So if we're multiplying by 7, I would be guessing it's 7 times 14 equals 98. And I guess 14 because 7 times 4 equals 28, which gives us the 8. And then 7 times 1 is 7 plus 2 is 98. So this is going to be negative 14 equals g. And we solve the equation with 2 steps. This is what I like you to do. I like you to try problems 6 and 7 on your own. When you're finished, come back to me and we will check your answers. By the way, if you think this worksheet is too easy and I'm not helping you, then you don't have to listen to me. You can do this worksheet on your own. I'm here to help the people who are struggling or need help. So try problems 6 and 7. If you need my help, come back to me and we will check your answers. See you in a bit. Welcome back. You are supposed to do problem 6 and 7. Problem 6, we have 72 minus 3k. Well, you have numbers and a variable on the same side of the equal sign, so no one is happy. So you're going to have to move someone over here. And then you have negative 162, which is by himself. So he has no variables, so he's happy. So you're definitely not moving this guy right here. So now the question is, what are you going to move first on the left side? Well, are you going to move the 3k? Are you going to move the 3? Are you going to move the 72? And we already talked about this. You normally move the number that's not next to the variable, or the one that's related to adding and subtracting. And as you can see, this one does not have a sign, so it must be positive. And since he's not touching the variable, I would move the 72 first. And you're going to move the 72 to the opposite side, so you're going to do the opposite operation, which means you're going to do minus 72 to both sides. Well, 72 minus 72 is 0, it's gone. And you have a 3k here. But hold on, right here is a negative sign. Don't forget you have to include that negative sign. Some of you might be saying, that's not a negative sign, that's a minus sign. Well, if you forgot it, a minus and a negative are actually the same thing. So it is a negative. All right, so don't forget that negative sign. And over here, we have negative 162 and negative 72. And if you wanted to write this a good way, I would write it this way as an addition problem. And since the signs are the same, you are going to add them. So we just do 2 plus 2 is 4. 6 plus 7 is 13, carry the 1, and 1 plus 1 is 2. And as I told you before, when you're adding negative and positive numbers, you always take the sign of the bigger number. 162 is bigger, so the answer is going to be negative. It actually doesn't matter here because both of them have the same sign, so it's going to be negative. Alrighty, and that's the rule when you're adding positive and negative numbers. You add them if the signs are the same. You subtract if the signs are different, but you always take the sign of the larger number. Now, we need to move the 3 over to this side because the 3 wants to get away from the k and join his buddy, the negative 234. And we already talked about this. Negative 3k is multiplication, so the opposite operation would be division. So you're going to divide both sides by negative 3. Well, negative 3 divided by negative 3 is 1, and 1 times k is k. So you got a k right there. And you have 234 divided by 3. As you can see, I don't care about this negative until I'm done. So 23, you got 23 and 3. 3 goes into 23 7 times. 7 times 3 is 21. You're going to be left with 2. You bring down the 4, and 3 goes into 24 8 times. So the answer is 78. Now, the rule for multiplication and division of positive and negative numbers, if you have a negative, the answer will be negative. But if you have two negatives, the answer will be positive. Since we have two negatives, the answer is positive 78. But you don't have to write the plus if you don't want to. I'm just going to write k equals 78. And there's the answer to problem number 6. Problem number 7. You have 82 by himself. There's no variable next to him, so I assume, or actually I know, we will not move this number. He is happy. Why move him? Then you have 42 plus z over 4, so you have a variable and numbers on this side of the equal sign, so no one is happy, and we're going to have to move the numbers towards the 82. Again, you're not going to move the z because that won't solve anything. You're just going to be upsetting the 82. The 82 will be looking at you going, "What are you doing? Why are you sending that z to me? I was happy." So you're not going to send the z towards the 82. So the question is, are you going to move the 42 first or the 4 first? And we already talked about it before. You should move the 42 first because he's not touching the variable, and it'll just be a quick add or subtract. If you move this 4, by the way, this means division, so you're going to have to multiply everything on this side by 4, which means you're going to have to do 4 times 42, which makes that number bigger, and it gives you more work. You can do it that way, but why would you want to? Why don't you just move the 42 to the other side, and it'll make your life easier. So let's move this 42 to the other side. There's no sign, so it's positive, and you send it to the opposite side, so the opposite operation would be minus 42. So you're minus 42 to both sides. So the 42s are gone. You end up with z over 4 equals 2 minus 2 is 0. 8 minus 4 is 4. You get 40. Now you're going to move the 4 to the other side. And we just talked about this, that z over 4 is the same thing as z divided by 4. So you're going to do the opposite operation, which means you're going to times both sides by 4. Times both sides by 4. The 4's are gone. You end up with z equals 4 times 40. All you do is 4 times 4 is 16, and then you add a 0. So 160 equals z. Got to watch my space right here, writing too big. Try to be neater on the next problems. All right, this is what I like you to do. I like you to try problems 8, 9, and 10 on your own. When you're finished, come back to me and we will check your answers. See you in a bit. Welcome back. You were supposed to do 8, 9, and 10. Let's take a look at problem number 8. Problem 8, you have 2e, so you have a variable and a number on this side, so no one is happy. You have 95 minus 17e. Again, you have numbers and a variable on this side, no one is happy. So we have to move something to make somebody happy, or we need to move someone or something. So a variable or a number is by itself. Well, if you move the 95, you still have 17e over here. So that really doesn't solve the problem. And again, you're upsetting the 2e by bringing more numbers to him. You'll feel like you're beating him up or picking on him. Why are you picking on me? I already have one number. Why are you giving me more numbers? I don't want more numbers. Please stop.
Ooh la la, that's crazy.
So I think we should move this minus 17e to the other side. And again, it is a minus 17e, so the opposite operation would be a plus 17e. So we're going to plus 17e to both sides, plus 17e. Minus 17e plus 17e equals 0, so that's gone. So you end up with 95 on the side, and 95 is like, woohoo, I'm by myself. And over here we have 2e plus 17e, which gives us 19e. And the e's looking at the 19 and going, dude, the 95's over there. Why don't you go join them? And this 19's like, yeah, man, you're right. I should go join the 95. So the 19 gets sent over to the opposite side. So we do the opposite operation. And I know I keep on repeating myself over and over again about this. 19e is the same thing as 19 times e. So the opposite operation is division. I don't think I have to talk about this anymore. You should know it by now. I think I said it enough times. So we're going to divide both sides by 19. The 19s get canceled out. So you're left with e on this side equals 95 divided by 19. Well, since this ends in a 5, my guess it's going to be 5 times 19 equals 95, which it does. 5 times 9 is 45, carry the 4. 5 times 1 is 5, plus 4 is 95. So 95 divided by 19 is 5. All right, problem number 9. We have 42 minus h over 5, so no one is happy over here. And we have 187 by himself, so there's no way we're moving that 187. And since we have a number here by himself, it means we should move all the numbers to this side. And just like the problem before, we should move this 42 first because he's not next to the variable, and also it's a quick addition or subtraction. And since there's no sign, it's a positive, so the opposite would be minus 42 and minus 42. 42's cancel each other out. We get negative or minus h over 5. Don't forget that negative. And over here we get 7 minus 2 is 5. 8 minus 4 is 4. 1 minus nothing is 1. So we get 145, and over here we get h over 5. What you want to do is you want to assign this negative to the 5. And since this is division, I know we talked about this before, h over 5 is the same thing as h divided by 5. So since we're sending the 5 or the negative 5 to the opposite side, we're going to do the opposite operation. So we are going to do a times negative 5 to both sides. So the 5's are gone over here, and we end up with h equals, well, what is 145 times 5? 5 times 5 is 25, carry the 2. 5 times 4 is 20 plus 2 is 22, carry the 2. 5 times 1 is 5 plus 2 is 7. So you're going to get negative 725. Problem 10. Problem 10, you have 91 plus 7u. So no one is happy because you have numbers and a variable on the same side. And you have 21u. And so no one's happy over there either. So the question is, what do you want to move? Well, since you have 21u over here, I think you want to move the 7u to join his buddy 21u. You're going to do the opposite operation, which is subtraction, because this is plus. So you're going to subtract both sides by 7u. 7u minus 7u is gone. It's 0. You end up with 91 equals 21 minus 7. So you're going to borrow from the 7. This becomes an 11. 11 minus 7 is 4. And 1 minus nothing is 14. Should have known that. I should have done that in your head really quick. So you have 14u. So the 14 wants to move over to the 91 to join his buddy. And since this is multiplication, the opposite operation is division. You're going to divide both sides by 14. The 14's are gone. You end up with u on this side. So we end up with 91 divided by 14. Well, 5 times 14 is 70. 6, 7. My guess would be 7. No, 7 would be too high, so my guess would be 6. 6 times 4 is 24. You're going to carry a 2. 6 times 1 is 6 plus 2 is 84. You're going to subtract. You cannot do 1 minus 4, so you're going to borrow from the 9. It becomes an 8. The 1 becomes an 11. 11 minus 4 is 7. Well, to continue this problem, we're going to have to add a decimal, which we bring straight up. And then we add a 0, which we bring straight down, and we get 70. Well, this must be 5, because 5 times 14 is 70. And we subtract and we get 0. So this answer right here must be 6.5. Let me erase that. To finish this off, you do 11, 12, and 13. When you're finished, come back to me and we will check your answers. See you in a bit. Welcome back. You were supposed to do 11, 12, and 13. Problem 11. You have 70 minus 9n. So no one is happy because you have numbers and a variable. And here you have 781. He's happy he's by himself. So you're not going to touch this guy. So we already know we're going to need to move the numbers towards the 781. And who are you going to move first? Well, we don't want to be dividing everything by 9. So we want to move the 70 first. So we're going to move the 70 this way. And since there's no sign, this is a positive. So the opposite operation would be minus 70. And you're going to do that to both sides. The 70s are gone. So you end up with negative 9n. Don't forget that subtraction sign is a negative. Over here you have 1 minus 0 is 1. 8 minus 7 is 1. And 7 minus nothing is 7. So you get 711. Hey, 711. Now, you're going to want to move the negative 9 towards the number because he wants to join his buddy. So you're going to divide both sides by negative 9. And I already told you I wasn't going to tell you anymore that 9n means 9 times n, and you're sending it over to the opposite side, so you have to do the opposite operation, which means you have to divide. So you divide by -9. This is gone because it'll equal 1, and 1 times n is n. So you have 711 divided by -9, but I don't care about the negative yet. 9 goes into 71. Well, 8 times 9 is 72, so this must be 7. 7 times 9 is 63. You're going to subtract 71 minus 63 is 8. You're going to bring down the 1, and 9 goes into 81 9 times. 9 times 9 is 81, and you are done. So the answer is 79 right there. But we're not done yet because there is a negative right there. And when you're dividing or multiplying, if you have only one negative, the final answer will be negative. If you have two negatives, the answer will be positive, because two negatives make a plus sign. So it's actually negative 79. Don't forget these negatives, because that'll mess up your whole answer. Be very careful with those. I almost forgot that one. All right, problem 12. You have 8b. Well, you have a variable and a number, so you already know they're not happy. You have -9 and 23b. You have to ask yourself, who do you want to move? If you move the -9, all you're doing is sending more numbers towards the b. So you don't want to do that. You want to move the 23b over here so the 23b can join the 8b. Well, you're going to do the opposite operation. So you're going to do minus 23b to both sides. Like that. 23 minus 23 is 0, so that's gone. So you have -9 right there. Over here you have 8 minus 23b. So all you do is write 23 minus 8, write the bigger number on top. You're going to have to borrow. This is 13 minus 8, which is 5, and 1 minus nothing is 15. So you're going to end up with 15b, but the bigger number was negative, so it's going to be -15b. So the -15 wants to join the -9 because you want to separate the variables and the numbers. And since this is multiplication, you're going to divide both sides by -15. -15 divided by -15 is 1, and 1 times b is b. And over here you're going to have 9 divided by 15. Very interesting. It's not 15 divided by 9. Don't get confused about that. So you're going to have to add a decimal, because we're going to have to add a 0 because 9 is too small and 15 doesn't go into it. So we add a 0. So how many times does 15 go into 90? Well, 3, 5, 6. I would think it would be 6, because 6 times 15, 6 times 5 is 30, carry the 3. 6 times 1 is 6, plus 3 is 90. So it is 6. So you get 90 here and you're done. Don't forget there's a decimal here. You can even add a 0 if you like. So the answer is 0.6. And here you add a negative, and I told you before, two negatives make a positive. So the answer actually is positive 0.6, or you can just write 0.6. Same thing. Those negative and positive numbers get confusing sometimes. Just be careful. Problem 13, you have x over 8, or x divided by 8, minus 12. So these guys aren't happy. And you have 12 over here by himself. So you know you're not going to move that 12. The question is, do you move this 8 first or the 12 first to join their buddy number 12? You definitely are not moving this x, because then the 12 would be saying,
"What are you doing to me, buddy? I was all by myself, and then you give me a variable? Oh my, you must hate me."
you're definitely not moving the x. Well, we talked about this before. You want to move the number that's not next to the variable, or do the adding and subtracting first to save you some time and create less work. We're going to move this minus 12 to the opposite side. Since it's the opposite side, we do the opposite operation, which is plus 12. The 12s are gone because 12 minus 12 is 0. So you're left with x over 8 equals 12 plus 12 is 24. Now you know you're going to move the 8 over, not the x. And this is division. We've talked about this already. So we know we're going to have to multiply both sides by 8. The 8s are gone, and you're left with x equals 8 times 24. 8 times 4 is 2, carry the 3. 8 times 2 is 16, plus 3 is 19, so you end up with 192. And guess what? We are finished. I hope I helped, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.